Nigeria's gross domestic product grew in the third quarter by 2.5% compared to the 2.2% recorded in the same quarter in 2022. However, we did see the growth largely driven by the services sector. To discuss the implications of that growth and, of course, break down these figures, I am now joined by an economic analyst, Aliyu Illas. Thank you for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. And let's start with a general assessment of this third quarter GDP report from the National Bureau of Statistics, especially in light of the current economic realities. What is your assessment of that data?
Right. I think it is expected that we'll have a growth in this quarter, simply because, the fallout of design of Naira and other things that happened earlier before have started reducing. And that's why we have a better up at this point. But is it what we actually expect? No. We expect to have more robust increase in the third quarter. But however, if you look at how things actually went, you see that most of our expected outputs are not performing as expected, such as the agricultural sector, industry sector, and also service sector. Also, they did not grow as expected. So I think that is the challenge we have.
Okay, speaking of the service sector, which you've pointed out, I mean, we all understand that these sectors did not perform as much as was expected. However, we did see that the numbers, the service sector was the largest driver of growth in that report, which was released on Friday. We saw the service sector grow at about 3.99% and, of course, contributed about 52.7% in terms of the aggregate GDP. We saw this happen particularly with the service sector. What was the catalyst for that growth recorded in the service sector? Well,
I think it's the negative impact of the agricultural sector and industrial sector that made us to think a service sector has also gone well. If you look at this year particularly, the service sector has also suffered a lot. In fact, looking at it from the 9 months, if you look at the stock exchange that you just read out, in the last 9 months, they have also lost about 497 billion, especially MTN and Airtel. And this is simply because of the purchasing power of citizens, because of all the fallout of economic policy that happened. So, however, I think service sector, thanks to them that they are moving, but are they moving as expected? No. It's just the way because others are having an issue. Then for service sector, I think it is expected at this point in time globally to grow more in service sector as well, because, if we can really do more, which of the service sector is actually growing? It's telecoms. So what about other sectors of the service sector? So if you look at some economies, even in the service sector that they used to develop, they don't have arable of land like we do have. They don't have oil and gas that we do have, and the manufacturing sector is not doing. But the service sector are doing actually. I think we need to do more in service sector to encourage more people to come into the business. Government also must create more enabling environment and localize our service sector, our support system more, so that service sector will also grow more than this. I think it's a good one in the right direction for service sector to grow, but manufacturing and industrial sector should take the lead. I mean, manufacturing sector and agricultural sector should take the lead, not service sector in a country like Nigeria.
Speaking of the agricultural sector, which you've touched on briefly,
right,
we saw a growth of about 1.3%, which was quite weak compared to how the agri sector would usually do in the past. What was the effect, or what brought about that fall in the agri sector? I say this because we've seen quite a number of policies being channeled towards the agri sector. However, we haven't seen the agri sector perform up to par to the expectations of these policies. What, in your point of view, is the reason for that?
Most of the agricultural policies that would have helped has been eroded by a lot of things as well. And that's why when you are bringing up a policy, you must also work on the enablers, because you don't just bring out policy, you have to also look at the enablers that will make it work, and also kill the negativity that could maybe reduce your what you intend to have. Now, if you look at our insecurity, it's a serious problem where we are taking it for granted. If you go to a place like Plateau, people find it difficult to even go to farm, go to Samfara. These people find it difficult to go to farm because of they have to even pay the insurgency to even secure them. You understand? If at all they want to go, it's a serious fallout. Also, flood. The issue of flood has become so much a big one that is reoccurring. If I look at the issue of Lago Dam and other dam, Nigeria is supposed to have built its own dam that will contain all this. And beyond that, also look at the anchor borrowers. You can see it's not quite long that they even ask the farmers to start returning the money. It's pretty difficult for them to return because it was not well structured. And I think we should start faulting CBN for that, because if you want to give loans for agriculture, we have a Bank of Agriculture and we have Bank of Industry. It is not okay for CBN to start going into those areas. Give this fund to Bank of Agriculture, give it to Bank of Industry, let them do their right job. It's not easy for CBN when you are supposed to make sure, look at monetary policy and stability of the economy. You are still looking at farmer, anchor borrow and whatever. I think it's a misplaced priority. That's part of what really reduce the impact of the fund they have been giving out.
Okay, let's move on now to the oil sector. Of course, the oil sector is a major a major revenue producing sector for the Nigerian economy. However, we did see growth in that sector, talking about the levels of production. That has improved. However, we did see a bit of contraction with growth. There's been a lot happening in that sector, from removal of fuel subsidy and other economic policies being channeled towards that sector. How would you say that sector fared vis-a-vis the current realities and the data we are seeing from the NBS? Right,
from what you just showed just now about President Tinubu just reappointing the NNPCL MD,
Mele Kyari. He retained him as
Kyari. Yes, you see that maybe he's satisfied with what is actually happening. However, he has done his part, because you see that during his regime, they have tried to contain the issue of oil theft, which is a major problem. You see that they even locate different pipe, different places. So I think we must take charge of that sector, because that's the only sector we even have foreign exchange. If you look at our dollar issues now, I think if we have a good and robust oil and gas system, we wouldn't have issue of a shortage of fund or short supply of dollars in our economy. So, but I think we need to, now that it's privatized and with the new law that has come about, I think by now we should do more. However, if you look at that GDP as well, oil and gas does not contribute that much. These are the things that we should do. But I think we need to position it to the rightful place. They should make sure they make it a priority, make sure that they really kill corruption, because our major issue in that area has to do with oil theft and corruption. So if we can do it very well, I think that will be fine. Perhaps I also expect them to also bring it to stock exchange, so that people can easily come about and people will take and own it. You can look at Saudi Aramco, and I'm sure Nigeria is also canvassing Saudi Aramco to also come to invest. So if you look at Saudi Aramco, it's not only big in Saudi Arabia, it's also big in America. So we must grow our oil and gas to get to that level. Perhaps what is happening at this our gas sector, energy, we can also do more in that area, because you know why? To galvanize and move every economy, there's issue of that energy security. I want to talk about energy security to cut across all these aspects, because we are still in a rentier state where we have our own crude oil, take it outside of Nigeria, refine it, and they will now sell it at global price, because we don't have any competitive advantage in that sector. We must make sure that our refinery, perhaps we also expect our refinery to start working by December, vis-a-vis with Dangote. If these two come on board that is working, I think we'll have a good foreign exchange, and Nigeria will be better. Perhaps you could see that even upon how expensive it is, sometimes you see that it's still difficult to buy from the filling station, and sometimes they even say NNP still remain the only importer. So we can't wait for Dangote and we can't wait for Warri refinery to start working, so that at least Nigeria can benefit from what we naturally have, which we call our common patrimony.
Okay, what are the key contributors towards, harnessing the potentials that are inherent in the oil sector? I say this because you've rightly pointed out, we've seen the emergence of the Dangote refinery, and of course works are being channeled towards the other refineries across the nation. But what more can we do? You made mention of the Saudi Aramco in Saudi Arabia, and just recently we had the president, sign some agreements with Saudi Arabia. What ways can we, fully enjoy the potentials that are inherent in that sector?
Well, so far, Nigeria has never benefited as expected in that oil and gas sector. And we have seen a situation whereby President Muhammadu Buhari was the Minister of Petroleum. I think the same thing is happening now. I think our major problem is leadership and killing of corruption. If we can actually have the right direction from the President himself, by having the right people at the right helm of affair, like he actually make sure that he still retain Mele Kyari, because I'm sure that Mele Kyari must have been doing something that impressed the president, for president to say, yes, Mele Kyari, come and continue to do this this job. perhaps we need to have professional in that area generally, and we start, since it's now a private sector, we need to look at it more, because but I still have issues on the relationship between the government and the oil and gas, I mean the NNPC, because you recall when Mele Kyari want to go for money to make sure that we don't experience increments in the dollar relation trouble to really get to import. I think he still have to go to president to get is not. We must also make sure that we separate those two things so that at least we can run this business as is expected and make profit as expected. But I think the major thing is this, just the leadership. If the leadership can take the bull by the horn and make sure he put the right people at the helm of affair, we will develop, because I think we are not short of professionals, we're only short of good direction and corruption that is bedeviling the sector itself. It's a big issue in that area when it comes to corruption. We must make sure we tame it to have a good development in Nigeria.
That's an interesting point of view. I mean, in your words, we're not short of professionals, we're only short of direction.
Right.
Let's look at growth projections. We've seen quite a number of growth projections from diverse bodies, including the IMF. I believe the IMF at some point this year downgraded Nigeria's economic growth forecast by 0.3% to about 2.9% for the full year of 2023. Do you completely agree with these projections? And if not, what are your projections, growth projections for this year? As
it is, Nigeria is in a very tight situation. We have issue of inflation, we have issue of foreign exchange, we have issue of unification. You know, a lot of issues are affecting Nigeria, but not Nigerian problem only. I think it's a global issue. I will agree with the IMF, but I also say that then if you look at Nigerian budget 2024, I want to agree with one analysis I saw on the Guardian newspaper this morning, that Nigeria is over ambitious. That's the way they put that English, and I agree with them, because you can't say we have inflation at 27%, 0.33%, and you are projecting 21% for 2024. You can see that we are actually over. But I want the situation whereby will be more realistic. If you also listen to the Cardoso, the CBN governor, he also made some statement during the CIBN that also will help the economy. But we are tired of rhetoric in Nigeria. We want a natural and flow. He said he will return CBN to his priority, which I agree. Like I mentioned earlier, we should shave intervening in what we are not supposed to intervene. If you want to intervene through fund, go give it to the necessary handlers to handle that. But for projects, I think 3% will be a good one, because hopefully things will still get better. We have very short period, but I think, you know, the fallout of what has happened is getting reduced to an extent. And government has also come out and said they are realizing about 1 trillion from the removal of fuel subsidy monthly. We want to see how that will also come into the economy and help. But the purchasing power for Nigerians are very poor. We are just not that. We don't just have that strength to really purchase and spend more money. Perhaps if you look at most things that domestic houses also spend more, like drugs, you see they are also increased. So purchasing power is quite is a problem for Nigeria at this point in time.
Indeed, and you touched on inflation for a short second, where you rightly mentioned that inflation currently stands at double digits, and we've had that for a long time. We also saw inflation hit the highest level in over 18 years. As the year runs to an end or gets to a close, what are your inflation projections as well? I say this because, like you rightly mentioned, we saw the budget projections for next year with the figures that they had put there for inflation, for exchange rate, and all of that, which you rightly pointed that you don't completely agree with, especially with the inflation figure that is there. But what are your projections, say, for the month of November and December as the year comes to a close? Right,
I wouldn't know because of the challenge of purchasing power of Nigeria, but naturally, November, December always attracts more purchasing, right? So it's always make the inflation to also go up to an extent because of the way people move things. But because of the purchasing power, but will it stop people from traveling? Will it stop people from doing those activities? Trust Nigeria, we'll still find our way to do that. So I see the inflation still moving up to an extent. Maybe by January, February, it might be coming down, but that it will come down by December, I don't expect that.
And speaking of the CBN moving away from the, how did the CBN governor put it? It's interventionist sides
Projects,
to
yes.
to doing the primary responsibilities of the CBN. Now we are moving into the year 2024. How do you foresee that playing out? I ask this because, like the CBN governor also mentioned, speaking of Olayemi Cardoso, he said the Monetary Policy Committee will not be meeting as often as it has met in the past. So we do not expect so much interaction of the CBN with the market. But what do you foresee in the year 2024 regarding all these, the new policies that he has introduced?
I would not agree with the CBN governor, Dr. Olayemi Cardoso, that the MPC will not be. The fact remains that as they are not meeting, it also have its own negative impact on the economy, because there will be a lot of speculation, suspicion, and what have you. So I think it should make sure that they meet as regularly as possible. Perhaps all these policies, they are good, but the thing is, can it match action with words, which is very, very key. So for me, I think it should start doing things they're supposed to do. Like he said, the past administration of Emefiele has actually bastardized some things, because if you look at even the bringing out their report, it takes like 7 years before we see report. He should not do that. He should do it yearly. And also intervening in all things that are not supposed to intervene, like giving anchor borrower, giving loans and whatever. They should not do that. They can support, but if you want to support, give that support through maybe if it's for agriculture, Bank of Industry, and Bank of Agriculture is there, Bank of Industry is there. A lot of institutions are there that can handle that, and they will do that professionally. So it will not distract you from the actual thing that you are supposed to do. And our relationship with maybe Morgan and what have you, in terms of using our money as collateral and what have you, I think that's another thing. So if we see reports every year, every year, I think that would have exposed the negativity, and Nigeria would have also advised as expected. So everything should not be shrouded in secrecy at this point in time. It should be an open economy, and people will definitely support the government when it is open.
Lastly, before we go in a minute, of course, the Naira to dollar rate, we've seen the Naira, unfortunately, nosedive in recent times. Your projections, say, for the first quarter of 2024?
Well, nosediving of Naira, I think we are not doing the right thing they're supposed to do, because, ideally, bringing together unification of Naira and also removal of subsidy, it's a serious issue that you must have something intern that you're using to balance, right? No, we are not exporting as expected. We're not producing as expected. Even in Nigeria, we have a lot of issues. So for me, I think with what we are actually seeing, we may have a better experience of Naira to dollar in the first quarter. I think we will have a good, a balanced one in favor of Nigeria by first quarter.
Insightful conversation on the recently released GDP report from the National Bureau of Statistics, where we did see the Nigerian economy grow by 2.53% in the third quarter of 2023. And I had with me Dr. Aliyu Illas, who is an economic analyst, and he indeed did justice to the data which was released by the NBS. Thank you again for joining us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
And this is where we wrap up today's edition of the program. You can catch this interview on Trust TV's YouTube channel to catch up on a conversation this morning. From myself, Chiamaka Enendu, it's bye for now.